Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into, well, maybe the biggest question there is. Where did we actually come from?
It's fundamental, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
And for ages, you've basically got two main answers on the table. There's, divine creation, think Genesis.
Right. Or there's evolution, Darwin's idea of gradual change over millennia.
Exactly. Familiar territory. But what if?
Oh.
What if there's another story? A third explanation, kind of hidden in plain sight in some really ancient sources that are, frankly, only recently getting a fresh look.
That's precisely what this deep dive is about. We're going to explore those pretty incredible ancient claims. We're focusing hard on information dug up literally from Sumerian texts.
Okay.
And we'll lay out evidence, a whole narrative, really, that, let's be honest, challenges the standard timelines. And it opens up some seriously mind-bending possibilities about our history.
So the goal here isn't to convince anyone of one thing.
Not at all. It's about impartially presenting what these specific sources say so you can weigh it up, Consider what it might mean for your understanding of where we came from and maybe even where we're heading.
All right, let's do it. Where do we start this story? Mid-1800s.
Yeah, sounds about right. Archaeology as a science didn't really exist yet. But you had this guy, Heinrich Schliemann, bit of a character.
It's a Troy guy.
The Troy guy.
Yeah.
He just decides, based on Homer, I'm going to dig up Troy, which most people thought was just, a myth.
And he finds it.
Yeah.
In modern Turkey, Anatolia, against all odds.
Exactly. And his success, it just lit a total firestorm of exploration. People started digging everywhere.
Rome, Egypt.
Right. But a huge focus shifted to Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, and Iran, mainly because of all the Bible stories connected to that area.
Defense. And they started finding things.
Astonishing things. Cities like Kish, Nippur, even Abraham's hometown, according to the Bible, coming right out of the desert sands.
Wow. But there was something else, something even older.
That's the kicker. Beneath all those layers, they hit something more ancient than anything else they'd found. Sumer.
Sumer. How old are we talking?
Peaking around 6,000 years ago, so 4,000 BC. The oldest civilization, basically.
And they left stuff behind.
Did they ever? Hundreds of thousands of clay tablets. I mean, hundreds of thousands. They were so common, people were literally finding them and selling them on eBay for a while.
No way. On eBay. How do they even make them?
Pretty simple, really. River clay, patted flat. Use a wedge-shaped stylus to press in the symbol's cuneiform script, then bake it hard in a kiln. Permanent record.
And what was on them? Grocery lists.
Some of that, yeah. Contracts, marriage records, sales receipts, everything. The whole works of a complex society. And thankfully, this guy, Henry Rawlinson, cracked the code, figured out cuneiform, so we can actually read them.
Okay, so reading these everyday records, do anything stand out?
Oh, yeah, a big thing. Constant references to gods. Lowercase g. But the way the Sumerians wrote about them was different. They weren't distant, abstract beings. They said these gods lived among them, physically present.
Lived among them?
Yeah. Flew in the skies, apparently. Had homes in those big ziggurat temples. And they described them with, real personalities, annoyances, arguments, the whole deal. Like they were actual people, just more advanced or powerful, maybe?
That's unexpected. So not just myths and legends.
According to the tablets, no. They were writing about their reality. And these gods, they claimed, were responsible for, well, basically everything that made Sumer Sumer.
What do you mean?
All their firsts. Sumer gets credit for an insane list of innovations that are, like, the bedrock of our world.
Such as?
Okay, ready. Beer. They invented beer. Written language cuneiform, written music, medicine, the first doctors, first lawyers. They even had a two-house Congress like we do.
A bicameral Congress. Seriously.
Seriously. Metallurgy, working with metals, advanced navigation, mathematics, astronomy. Oh, and unique cylinder seals they use like personal signatures.
That's a lot. That's basically civilization right there.
Pretty much. And here's the really startling part, according to this narrative we're exploring. How fast it all appeared.
Fast.
Unbelievably fast. In terms of human development, going from simple villages to that whole list in just a couple of thousand years. It's lightning speed.
Put that in context for me.
Okay, think about our ancestors, hominids. It took them something like 2 million years just to make slightly better stone hand axes. A tiny improvement.
2 million years.
And the Sumerians. According to this timeline derived from the texts, they went from mud huts to a full-blown complex society in maybe 7,600 years. It's just, it doesn't fit the normal evolutionary curve. It's an anomaly.
A massive anomaly. So how did they explain it? How did the Sumerians themselves explain this sudden leap?
Well, that's the core of it, isn't it? They were consistent across tons of tablets, they said. We didn't invent this stuff.
They didn't?
Nope. They
Yeah.
said it was all gifts from the gods.
Gifts from the gods, okay. So they worshiped these gods who gave them writing and beer.
Ah, see, that's another fascinating bit. The word often translated as worship or prayer, the original Sumerian word was avad. It didn't really mean worship in our sense.
What did it mean?
It meant to work for, to serve. You see those Sumerian statues often in that pose with the hands clasped?
Yeah, the votive pose.
Right. That pose basically signified, I work for my God. It was a service relationship, much more practical, less abstractly devotional than modern religion.
Okay, so they're working for these gods.
Yeah.
Who are these gods? Did they have names?
They did. The texts call them the Anunnaki.
Anunnaki. And what were they like?
Well, the depictions show them as huge, towering over the humans. Figures like Enki, Shamash, they look colossal.
Huge gods. Sounds a bit like other ancient stories.
It does. And proponents of this theory draw a direct line to the Hebrew Bible's Anakim, or the Nephilim. That word Nephilim, it literally means those who came down, or those who were cast down.
Those who came down.
From where?
From the sky, presumably.
Which?
Which fits with how the Sumerians described the Anunnaki's technology. They described their tech.
Oh, yeah. The tablets talk about flying machines. All sorts of descriptions. Black flying birds, sometimes stealthy, sometimes incredibly noisy, like jets or rockets, maybe. Eagles are common symbols, too.
Flying machines? What else?
Things that sound remarkably like long-distance communication, satellites, maybe. Weapons capable of destroying entire cities, and definitely space travel.
Space travel. 6,000 years ago.
That's what the texts seem to describe. It's wild stuff. There's even this detail where priests associated with the god Enki, who is linked to water and wisdom, are shown wearing fish-like outfits or helmets. Some researchers kind of jokingly compare it to how modern submariners might wear dolphin insignia, a symbol of their domain.
Okay, this is a lot. Why were they here? According to the Sumerians, what was the Anunnaki's purpose on Earth?
Gold!
Gold. Like jewelry.
Not exactly. According to the texts, interpreted this way, they arrived a long time ago. Around 445,000 years ago.
Whoa, hold on. 445,000? How did they get that number?
Well, it's based on their unit of time called a shar. One shar is 3,600 years. The texts say the Anunnaki ruled for 120 shars before the Great Flood. And 3,600 years. That's supposedly the orbital period of their home planet, Nibiru.
Nibiru.
Yeah.
Another planet in our solar system.
An undiscovered one, according to this theory, on a long elliptical orbit. Anyway, they came here for Earth's minerals, specifically gold.
Why gold?
The interpretation is they needed it for technology, maybe electronics, but primarily to suspend as fine particles in Nibiru's atmosphere to prevent heat loss. Atmospheric repair, essentially.
Okay, so they arrived 445,000 years ago to mine gold. Where did they set up shop?
First base was in the Persian Gulf. They called it Eridu, which means something like home in the far away.
Eridu. And the gold.
They initially tried getting it from the Gulf waters, but the big score, the mother lode, was in southern Africa, what they called the Apsu.
Southern Africa. So they knew about different continents way back then.
Apparently. Suggests a global awareness, maybe from orbit. And this gold, they didn't just keep it here. The system involved transshipping it first maybe to a base on Mars.
Mars.
Yeah, and from Mars onto Nibiru whenever its orbit brought it back through the inner solar system, which interestingly ties into some fringe theories about weird formations on Mars, like in Cydonia, the face, the pyramids there. Some suggest those could be remnants of Anunnaki outposts.
Okay, that's quite a picture. Mining gold for hundreds of thousands of years must have been tough work.
Extremely tough. So tough, in fact, that eventually the rank-and-file Anunnaki who were doing the actual digging in the mines down in Africa, they mutinied, had enough.
Mutiny. So a labor dispute, what happened?
Well, this is where the story takes an absolutely crucial turn. The leader in charge of the mining, Enlil, wanted to punish the mutineers harshly, but his half-brother Enki, the chief scientist, had another idea. A radical one.
Which was?
Instead of forcing the Anunnaki back to work, let's create a substitute worker, a primitive worker.
Create one.
By taking an existing creature already evolving on Earth, likely Homo erectus, and upgrading it.
Yeah.
Genetically modifying it.
Modifying Homo erectus.
Yeah.
To create.
Us. Modern humans. Homo sapiens. That's the staggering claim in these texts, as interpreted by Sitchin and others.
We were created as mine workers.
As a helper race, yes. The Sumerian creation story, the Enuma Elish, has a line. The creature exists. Bind upon it the image of the gods.
The image of the gods. That sounds familiar.
It does, doesn't it? Compare it to Genesis. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. Notice the plurals, us, our. Proponents of this theory ask, who is the us in Genesis if not the Anunnaki council described in the Sumerian texts?
Elohim, the plural often translated as God.
Precisely. And the first human in the Sumerian story, called
Adam.
Adamu.
Adam. That sounds very close, doesn't it? Adamu basically means earthling, or one of earth, and the place where this creation supposedly happened, the Garden of Eden, or Eden in Sumerian.
Garden of Eden. But in the Sumerian version, it's described less like a paradise and more like a research lab, a genetic research station, run by Enki and his half-sister Ninti, who was also called Ninhursag, the chief medical officer.
So Enki and Ninti, they were the scientists in the lab coats, basically.
That's the picture. They supposedly tinkered with Homo erectus DNA, maybe adding some Anunnaki genetic material to create us, the Adamu, around 250,000 years ago. There's even an amazing cylinder seal.
Yeah.
It shows Ninhursag depicted with what look like lab assistants, holding up the newly created Adamu, surrounded by flasks and equipment. It looks uncannily like a modern genetics lab scene.
That's incredible. So this theory suggests the Bible stories are echoes of older Sumerian accounts.
That's a central argument. You see parallels everywhere. Enki, often symbolized by a serpent because of his wisdom in genetics work, looks a lot like the serpent in Eden. There's a Sumerian story about one brother killing another, sounds like Cain and Abel, and the big one, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The flood story.
Exactly. Predates the Noah story by maybe 2,000 years. It tells of Ziusudra, warned by Enki about a massive flood, told to build a boat, save life, landing on Mount Ararat. It's virtually the same story.
So the idea is?
The theory posits that the Hebrew Bible isn't the original source, but rather a shortened, edited, perhaps morally reframed version of these much older Sumerian histories, which the Israelites likely encountered during their captivity in Babylon, right there in Mesopotamia.
Okay. Mind officially bending. This paints a radically different picture of our origins. But what about proof? Or at least strong evidence?
Right. It's a huge claim, needs huge evidence. Proponents lay it out almost like a court case. Let's call them exhibits for an open mind.
Exhibit A.
Humanity's ridiculously fast development. Exhibit A, the accelerated timeline. Seriously, think about it. We went from the Wright brothers' first flight, sputtering off the ground, to landing on the moon in just 66 years. That rate of technological explosion is unlike anything else in known evolutionary history. It suggests, to proponents, that we're a special case, not normal evolution.
Okay, speed of development. Exhibit B.
Our own bodies. Exhibit B, anatomical and genetic oddities. Compare us to primates, our supposed closest relatives. Our skulls are different, bone density, muscle structure.
We walk upright.
Right. Our eyes are rectangular, terrible night vision compared to most animals. We get sunburned easily. Our hands are made for intricate tool use, not just climbing or knuckle walking. Some argue these traits suggest we're not perfectly adapted, maybe not entirely from here, or at least recently modified.
And the genetics.
That's where it gets really interesting. Our brains are vastly larger and more complex than Homo erectus. Like, the info density is pages versus a single page. And then there's the smoking gun, as some call it.
Which is?
Chromosomes. Primates have 48. We have 46.
Okay, we lost 2.
Not exactly. Our chromosome 2 is clearly a fusion. 2 ancestral primate chromosomes seem to have been fused together end to end.
Fuse. Does that happen naturally?
It's incredibly rare in nature, but it's something that happens in genetic labs. So the argument goes, this fusion is a huge pointer towards genetic manipulation in our past. Mainstream science explains it as a natural, albeit rare, event early in the human lineage. But for this theory, it's Exhibit B's key piece.
Wow. Anything else genetically?
Yeah, a couple things. One study highlighted around 223 genes in the human genome that seem to lack predecessors on the evolutionary tree. They called them potential alien genes, acquired maybe through horizontal gene transfer or something else.
Alien genes. Seriously?
Well, that was the provocative term used in that specific research paper, highlighting their unusual nature. Plus, even Darwin noted humans have loads of genetic defects, over 4,000 known now. He said we have the earmarks of a domesticated animal, which, again, this theory links to potential side effects of genetic tinkering.
Okay. Genetics is complex. What's Exhibit C?
Planet Earth itself. Exhibit C, the Earth's scarred face. You know how all the continents seem to fit together, like Pangea? Well, planets usually form more evenly. Land distributed all around. The fact that Earth's landmass seems concentrated, as if it's one side of an original whole, is odd. This theory connects it to the Sumerian story of Nibiru, or its moon, colliding with a primordial planet called Tiamat.
The planet between Mars and Jupiter.
That's the one. The collision supposedly shattered Tiamat, creating the asteroid belt with one half, and the other half became Earth, knocked into its current orbit. And look at the Pacific Ocean basin.
Okay.
Its crust is way younger than the rest of the planet, like 200 million years old versus 4 billion for continental crust. This theory suggests the Pacific is the literal scar, the impact site where Tiamat was cleaved in two. We're living on half a planet, essentially.
That's a massive claim. Exhibit D.
Simpler. Exhibit D eyewitness accounts. Why dismiss all these ancient texts, Sumerian, Egyptian, Hebrew, that talk about powerful beings, flying craft, incredible feats? Are they all just myths, hallucinations, or are they basically historical records? People writing down what they saw and experienced, using the language they had, even if they didn't understand the technology. This theory argues for the latter. Treat them as eyewitness accounts.
Makes sense from that perspective. Exhibit E.
Unexplained structures. Exhibit E, ancient megaliths. Think Giza, the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx. Mainstream says Khufu built the pyramid as a tomb around 2500 BC.
Right.
But the evidence for it being Khufu's tomb is thin, according to this view, and the scale, the precision. We arguably couldn't build the Great Pyramid today, not exactly. Water erosion on the Sphinx suggests it's much older, maybe 10,500 BC.
So who built them then?
The theory points to the Anunnaki, using technology we don't have. Possibly as energy devices or navigation beacons, not tombs. They stand apart from later, clearly pharaoh-built pyramids, which are crumbling.
Okay. Exhibit F.
Technology. Exhibit F, technological parity. Back in the 1850s, when they first read the Sumerian tablets talking about flying, space travel, genetic engineering, weapons of mass destruction, it sounded utterly ridiculous, pure fantasy.
Because humans couldn't do any of that.
Exactly. But now, we fly, we've been to space, we do genetic engineering, we have instant global communication, we have weapons that can wipe out cities. If those same tablets were discovered today, wouldn't we see them differently? As maybe descriptions of a technologically advanced civilization.
That's a fair point. We've caught up to their myths. What's G?
Maps. Exhibit G, impossible maps, like the Piri Reis map, found in Turkey, dates to 1513.
Okay.
It shows coastlines, including parts of Antarctica, with incredible accuracy. But Antarctica is shown without its ice cap, revealing rivers and land masses beneath. That ice cap hasn't been gone for thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. Piri Reis himself said he copied it from much older source maps.
So who made the originals? How could they map an ice-free Antarctica?
The only way is from the air, right? Before the ice returned. This theory suggests Anunnaki matching technology.
Exhibit H.
Astronomy. Exhibit H, astronomical precision. The Sumerian creation epic, Enuma Elish. It describes our solar system's formation involving that intruder planet, Nibiru, hitting Tiamat.
Right, creating Earth and the asteroid belt.
But they also listed the planets. And they depicted 12 celestial bodies, sun, moon, and 10 planets, including planets beyond Saturn that weren't officially discovered by us until telescopes centuries later.
They knew about Uranus and Neptune.
They seem to. They described them accurately as watery twins, which Voyager 1 confirmed visually only in the 1980s. Blue-green, watery looking. How did they know?
Good question.
And their numbering system for the planets only makes sense if you count from the outside in, as if you're coming into the solar system. They called Earth the 7th planet, Mars the 6th, which works if Nibiru is coming from beyond Pluto, which they counted. From our sun-out perspective, it makes no sense.
Suggests an outsider's view. Okay, final exhibit. Exhibit I.
Life itself. Exhibit I, engineered life, agriculture, and animal domestication. The standard story is early humans patiently cultivated tiny wild seeds, bred fierce wild animals like the aurochs, huge, dangerous wild cattle.
Yeah, seems like a slow, hard process.
Right. Could hunter-gatherers, struggling day to day, really invest generations in selective breeding of near-inedible plants or deadly animals? It seems unlikely. What if, as the Sumerians claimed...
They're gifts from the gods.
Exactly. What if grains like wheat and barley and animals like sheep and cattle were actually bioengineered by the Anunnaki, maybe in that Garden of Eden research station, and then given to humans to cultivate and manage? It would explain the sudden appearance of agriculture and domestication.
Wow. Okay, those exhibits.
Yeah.
They definitely paint a consistent, if radical, picture based on interpreting those texts literally. So if the Anunnaki were here, created us, gave us civilization, what happened next? Did they just leave?
Eventually, yes. That's the next part of the narrative. The decision to depart seems linked partly to increasing friction, including the issue mentioned in Genesis 6, the sons of God, interpreted here as younger Anunnaki interbreeding with human women.
That caused problems.
Apparently. Enlil, the commander, wasn't happy. But the bigger factor was foreknowledge of a looming natural disaster.
The Great Flood.
Yes, but caused, in this theory, not just by rain, but by Nibiru's periodic passage through the solar system. Around 10,500 BC, its immense gravity was predicted to cause the Antarctic ice sheet, which was miles thick, then to destabilize and slide into the ocean,
Triggering a world-engulfing tsunami. A global flood.
Precisely. Enlil was apparently fine with letting humanity, their creation, get wiped out. Saw us as maybe getting out of hand.
But Enki, the scientist who made us.
He disagreed. He developed perhaps an affection for his creation. So defying the council, he secretly warned one human Yasudra in the Sumerian version, Utnapishtim in the Gilgamesh epic, Noah in the Bible.
Told him to build a boat.
A submersible one, actually, according to the detailed Sumerian text. Not just an ark for animals 2x2, but more like a vessel to preserve seeds, DNA, genetic material, the seed of life, along with his family and maybe some skilled workers.
And the Anunnaki? What did they do during the flood?
The texts describe them watching the devastation from orbit, in their craft, seeing the world submerged, then returning afterwards to find Yasudra's boat had survived, landing on Mount Ararat.
And then? Did they just abandon the survivors?
No. They seem to have taken pity or perhaps realized they still needed a workforce for a time. So post-flood, they decided to give humanity the tools to rebuild faster. They reintroduced the rudiments of civilization.
Like agriculture again. Metallurgy?
Exactly. Kingship, societal structures, writing,
Yeah.
even apparently technical manuals. There are tablets that seem to be instructions on how to make beer properly. They basically jump-started civilization again.
Setting us on the path to where we are now. So when did they finally leave for good?
The timeline suggests a final departure around 1210 to 1208 BC. There's a poignant image associated with this, a figure called Tycho Nurta shown kneeling before a throne that's empty. The inscription supposedly reads something like, "What will I do when my master has gone away?"
A sense of abandonment.
Yes. And here's another provocative idea from this theory. What happened when these physical gods, who people worked for, disappeared? Humanity felt a void.
And needed something to fill it.
Exactly. So the theory goes that's when humanity invented religion as we know it, shifting from working for tangible beings to worshiping unseen forces, trying to reconnect with the departed gods through prayer and ritual.
Wow. So religion arose after the gods left.
In this interpretation, yes. But maybe they didn't leave entirely, or at least they left someone or something behind to keep an eye on us.
The Watchers.
The Watchers. The Sumerian term was Igi. In Hebrew, concepts like emissaries or angels might connect. This idea ties directly into modern UFO phenomena.
How so?
Sightings, especially persistent ones around sensitive locations. Nuclear weapons facilities, for example. Places like the Y-12 complex at Oak Ridge or the famous incidents at Malmstrom and Minot Air Force bases, where UFOs reportedly hovered and temporarily disabled nuclear missiles in their silos.
And the appearance of the beings in these reports.
Often fits the description of the classic gray alien. Small stature, large head, big black eyes. This theory suggests these might be the Watchers, perhaps biological robots or a related species tasked by the Anunnaki to monitor us.
Monitor us. Why?
Particularly since 1945, the dawn of the nuclear age. The moment humanity gained the ability to potentially destroy itself and maybe damage the planet significantly, perhaps that crossed a line, triggering more active observation, a sort of, okay, kids have matches now, we need to watch closely scenario.
Silent warning, don't wreck the place.
Something like that. Protecting their investment, maybe. Or just concerned about the planetary ecosystem.
So this theory predicts, what? That they're still watching, that they'll return.
The speculation among proponents is yes, they're watching, and that a more direct encounter, maybe even a return or revelation, is likely in our near future. Perhaps early to mid this century. Our lifetime.
Okay, let's just sit with that. If this interpretation of ancient texts, this whole narrative, were proven true tomorrow, widely accepted, what happens?
The implications are profound. Just try to imagine. How would governments react? Religions, the Vatican, Islam, Hinduism, all of them. How would they reconcile this with their doctrines?
Financial institutions, our whole sense of history, our daily lives.
Everything changes, doesn't it? We'd be confronted, undeniably, with the fact that we are not alone in the universe, and we never have been. That our very existence might be owed to beings from elsewhere.
It's almost too big to comprehend. Is there a message in all this, according to the sources, from these watchers or the Anunnaki legacy?
If there's one consistent thread interpreted from these accounts and phenomena, it might be quite simple. This planet is rare, it's precious, take better care of it, your cradle is unique, don't destroy it.
A powerful message, regardless of where it comes from. As we wrap up this deep dive, it's a lot to process.
Definitely. And again, the idea isn't to say this is absolute fact, it's to encourage being an open-minded skeptic.
Yeah.
Look at the pieces of evidence presented within this theory, the texts, the anomalies, the parallels. Consider their cumulative weight.
If people want to explore this interpretation further.
Two key books really kick this off for modern audiences. Zechariah Sitchin's The 12th Planet is foundational for this specific translation and narrative. And Lloyd Pye's Everything You Know Is Wrong presents a lot of the biological and genetic arguments. They're fascinating reads, whether you end up agreeing or not.
So a final thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Just this. Imagine for a moment that this story, this unconventional history we've explored today based on these sources, is our actual past. If you accepted that, what personal responsibility would you feel to understand it better? And maybe more importantly, how might it change the choices you make today and tomorrow about your own life and about humanity's future on this fragile planet?
Because the next chapter.
Exactly! That story has yet to be written.